Steph Sword-Williams. Woo!
I'm going to put that down there because I'll probably knock it over. Hi everyone, welcome to the last talk of the event. I'm Steph Sword-Williams, I'm the founder of Fuck Being Humble, and tonight I'm going to talk to you about the soundtrack to nailing self-promotion. So for any of you that don't know the platform Fuck Being Humble, it was set up basically out of the frustration of seeing amazing talent go to waste or go unnoticed, and mainly because people didn't know how to articulate themselves and talk about themselves, or they didn't feel confident enough to share their achievements. Now, being humble is definitely something I would always encourage in your working career, but it's about knowing when to be humble and how to use that in the best possible ways. As you go through your career, you'll probably find the words self-promotion will get a bit of an awkward shudder, and people, because we're British, we all find it a bit awkward to talk about ourselves. But actually, when self-promotion is done right, it can really help to change your career. And I think one of the things that you have to look at is when you break down the words self-promotion, self means I, and promotion is just an activity to help reach an aim or a goal. So really there's nothing arrogant about that. It's actually just about how you perfect your own personal story and use it in the future to kind of achieve the goals you need to achieve. So I've been working in advertising now for the past 5 years, and I've seen the impact that storytelling can have on businesses, society, brands, and people. And I know that if you perfect yours now, as soon as possible, you'll be so much closer to achieving the goals that you want to do in the future. So without further ado, we'll move on to the first track. The first track is, if you don't have a dream, how are you going to have a dream come true? Now, I'm just going to give a quick warning. Not all of them are tracks, some of them are lyrics, but this is really important, and this is something that I found out recently, that even, so I'm 26, so 5 years older maybe than a few of you guys, or maybe a bit younger. And a lot of people don't have dreams even when they're 40 and 50 because they actually never stop to think what their dreams were. And again, if you can figure out what that is a lot sooner, you could reach it a lot quicker. So I read this book called The Dream Manager, and I would highly recommend reading it to anyone in the room. Without spoiling the plot, The Dream Manager is a book about a story of a business, basically, where the company that was being run at the time, they were losing their staff really quickly, and they just didn't know what the reason was. And when they sat down and asked their employees, why are you leaving? They said, well, because I don't think I could achieve my dreams here. And they said, well, what are your dreams? And the employee said, well, you know, to learn how to drive, or to give my kids the best Christmas, or these really basic things. It wasn't to have a mansion, and it wasn't to drive a sports car. It was basic human things that we want to achieve in life. So what the company did was hire a dream manager, and the dream manager acted as their financial advisor and would sit with them every month and help them achieve those goals. So if it was to learn to drive, the company would give them a few hours off a week so they could learn to drive. And there's a really lovely story about the father who wants to give their kids the best Christmas, so everybody in the office clubs in and gives presents to give to his children. I actually cried because I was on the way home from on a flight, and I was totally hungover, and it was quite an emotional journey, but it's a really, really great book. And it made me reassess, what are my dreams and what do I want to do? So to give you a bit of inspiration, my dreams were, I've been working in advertising now, and from writing a blog for the past sort of 5 years about advertising, I noticed that the things I wrote about were charity work and sort of world-changing advertising. I wasn't bothered about the glossy work. I was bothered about trying to create a change with the communications I create. So my big goal is to change the world with advertising that I work on. My second goal is to public speak to inspire. I found going to networking events that there weren't a lot of people my age, a female, and somebody who didn't run a business or wasn't a CEO at events, and I really struggled to connect with them because whilst it's great to hear from a 50-year-old middle-class white male, it's not representative of everyone, and actually there are people much younger doing amazing things that should get the spotlight. So my goal that I set was to public speak to inspire, and I'm here now, so hopefully I'm getting that one step closer. And finally, was to travel. Now, it's really important to stress that your dreams could be anything. They don't have to be career-based. Your dreams could be to travel the world. They could be anything you want. And for me, travel is one of them. I like to go on as many holidays as I can afford a year. And it's just kind of something that helps for me to kind of improve my goals but also enjoy my personal life. So these are my dreams, and this is what I got. So the first activity I want you to do is just take a minute now to write down what your dreams are. You could have multiple, you might only have one, but just take a minute to think about what are the dreams that you want to try and achieve. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop you there just because I'm mindful that we've got a lot to get through. But if you don't have time to write it down now, go home and just really think about what are your dreams. So the second lyric that I want to talk to you about is even Gwen Stefani's Let Me Blow Your Mind. You'll find that the constant theme is that I love 90s R&B, which I'm slightly worried might be a bit too old for you guys, but we're going to go with it anyway. Great, okay. So this is sort of the emotion that I want you guys to think when you're writing about yourselves, is that when you read it back, are you blowing people's minds? Because if not, you're going to fall into a very plain camp where you might not get many responses. I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and the big thing that people come across is FOS. I've made this up, by the way, but it's the fear of sounding stupid. And I think so many people worry about writing about themselves because, one, they don't know if it's representative, they've never been taught how to write about themselves, and plus you're just a bit nervous about how that might be perceived. But the problem with FOS is that you end up with FOG, which I know doesn't sound anywhere near as nice, but the fear of being generic. And that is the thing you need to avoid completely, because if you act too safe with the way you talk about yourself, you really will fall into generic camp. And so many employers get so many emails saying the same thing, and I just put it straight into my junk. I'll be honest, I just don't. If I just see the same generic words, I'm just not interested. So the big thing there is that you really need to focus on how you can stand out. So I want to do a little experiment with you. Can I have everybody stood up on their feet, please? Okay, stay standing if you've ever used these words to describe yourself. Okay, you can sit down now. Simple experiment. The entire room, what is there, like 100 people who have all described themselves exactly the same way. And whilst it's not a bad thing to use these words, it's about how you use these words in a more effective way. So if you use I am passionately obsessed with X, all of a sudden that feels slightly more interesting. But if you just say, I'm a passionate, hardworking person, it doesn't really give me much about your personality. Now, what I've done, although it might have been a bit embarrassing, it was a little bit more embarrassing for me when I was at university, because I did a CV writing workshop where my tutor asked us to stand up and read out our personal bios in front of 100 fashion girls, because that was the course I was on, and it very much felt like Lindsay Lohan in this scene. And just to make myself that little bit more vulnerable, I'm going to read to you what I wrote at the time. So I said that I was a mature, responsible undergraduate with excellent communication skills, studying a degree in fashion communication and promotion, confident in dealing with people of all ages, hardworking who values success in all parts of my studies, social and business life. And I was pretty confident when I walked in with this. I was like, I'm going to mop the floor. I'm fine. This is totally fine. And her actual response in front of 100 other people was, that shit, sit down. And I felt okay because she did it to every other person in the class, because all of us, despite us wearing hipster clothes and pink hair, we actually were all saying exactly the same. None of us had any point of difference. She made us do it 5 or 6 times. We had to keep standing up, sit down, until we started talking about ourselves differently in a way that people would actually get a flavour of who we are. And the best thing that she said to me that day was, put your personality to paper. It's so important that if I pick up your CV, I can read it and go, that's you. That I know that girl, that is her all over. And if I can't, well then what help is there for you to stand out anyway? So really try, and when you read it back, maybe pass it on to a friend, onto a family member, and say, do you think my personality comes across in this? And if it doesn't, ask them, what is my personality? What do you think I stand for? Who am I? What is missing in this to help get that across further? To give you a few examples, after I had that god-awful session, I went away and I wrote a few things, and these are some of the things that come through now on my CV. So I wrote a blog for 5 years. It wasn't even, I'm not a particularly good writer, I definitely wasn't at the time. It wasn't to show off my writing skills. It was because I had a love for advertising and I wanted to build up my knowledge in advertising, and it was almost like a memory bank, so that if I walked into a room, I could talk to anybody about any form of advertising. But in doing that, I actually did develop quite good thought leadership writing, and now I do that quite often, both commercially and for being humble. I've got a healthy obsession with communication, so a bit like Lee in the last talk. I love talking to people, and that's a good example of the unhealthy obsession with communication. Sounds much stronger than I'm confident or I like talking, so you can steal that if you want. I lived abroad when I was younger, so I lived in Madrid, New York and Hong Kong, and very lucky to do that. I know not everyone else did, but I know that was definitely a factor that helped me to adjust to new environments, to meet new people. And again, every time I walk into an interview, to say that I've lived in those different cities, as well as the different cities in the UK I've lived in, it's a good conversation starter. And a final bonus is that I'm related to the tallest man in the world, and that has absolutely nothing to do with my skill base. But every time I walk into an interview, someone says, "Tell me about your giant uncle then." So it's just a good thing. Even if I'm only remembered for the girl with the giant uncle, I'm all right, because at least they've remembered me. And that's what you guys really need to think about, is what things can I leave behind in my CVs, my online portfolios, whatever you're using to sort of talk about yourself. How can you get across the things that make you distinctively different? So the first task, or the second task now, is to write down 5 words about yourself that are not these words. Don't worry if it's more like 1 to 3. Driven. It is a common word, driven. So it maybe be, what are you driven to do, is what I'd push you to think of more.
Would you describe yourself as complicated? That's the wrong word to use. Sophisticated.
Sophisticated, also a good question, a good word to use. I suppose I'd just think about, what does that word mean to the employer that's about to read it?
And then I think it's interesting in technology, different aspects of it, how it works, the concepts of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you can't just throw in random words without actually backing up why you're using it. It's just really kind of
No, that's a really good point at the front, actually, guys. And I'd probably use this as a bit of a tip of, when you do write down your words about yourself, write down why, and keep writing down why, and keep writing down why, because then those words will become much stronger in your mind when you're being interviewed or when you use them on your CV, is that actually maybe you're sophisticated because of something that is more relevant than just, I'm sophisticated in age. So really good point at the front there. Try and write down why you're using these words, because then it will help justify the reason for including them. And then the next exercise I want you to do is write down 3 things that no one else can say about themselves. So have you got hobbies? What are your life achievements? What are your obsessions? Have you got random facts about yourself, like a giant uncle? And what gets you out of bed to do your job? I know some of you may not have a job just yet, but what if you did, if you were to be a lawyer or a designer or any of those things, why? What is the reason you're doing that? So again, take a couple of minutes to think about these questions and write down a few points. Okay, we're going to move on. But it looks like everyone's chatting about different ideas, so that's very encouraging. Okay, so the key of learning for that is to put your personality to paper. That is what I'd massively encourage. And at the end of each section, I've included a few references that you might want to check out. So Simon Sinek, Start With Why. If anyone's seen his TED Talk, it's brilliant, and it's all about helping mainly brands figure out what their purpose is. But it's actually a really great book for individuals as well. And the Confidence Kit. Now, guys, try not to be put off by the fact that it's pink, but it's a really great book, and it's very, very interesting to read about some of the reasons we have to overcome confidence issues and what they are. And actually, I see myself as quite a confident person, but she really taps into some of the things that I think I know a lot of people go through. So definitely worth checking out those books. Moving on. It's The Journey That Teaches You About Your Destination from Drake. So I think I find this a lot when I read people's CVs or I hear about their journeys. People are very factual about what they do, and they don't often tell the story behind what's helped them to get to that point. So to give you a quick example, around advertising, obviously, Samsung and Apple have been competing for years for domination of the market. And Samsung focuses on selling the features of the product, like this, whereas Apple focus on selling the benefits, like showing how great your underwater photos can be. So that is why Apple always win, because they sell the emotion of the product. They sell the dream. They show you what you could be if you have that product. So when it comes to talking about yourself and the achievements that you work on and the things you want to include on your CV, you need to think about how you can bring your input to life. Do not just say, I did X, because to somebody who hasn't worked with you, they have no idea what you did during that project to get to that point. To give you another example, on my CV, so I used to work for a university, and I redid their entire prospectus. So you're all at uni, or you've just finished uni, and you know how big those documents. That was a year of my life completely gone to one project, 365 pages. That I was quite happy to go in the bin. But yeah, basically, when I wrote down my involvement, I project managed the production of a university prospectus, including photography, design, and copy. Very factual, completely factual. Second example is to deliver a real overview of the university's offering. I conducted 27 interviews over 4 weeks, which influenced the entire creative content direction. Alongside this, I coordinated 3 shoots managing external suppliers, delivered the client an asset bank of over 300 pieces of content. Can you see the difference between the two statements? So if I pull them up now, you can see how this is super factual and this tells the journey of how I got to that project. And that's when you write down your things on your CV or you're in an interview, make sure that you really think about what did I have to do this project, because it will help sell what you can do in a much better way. So the task now for you is to think of achievement, write down the involvement you had, write down the impact the project had, and write down the skills you needed to carry this out. Now, you might be a bit early on in your career right now to have done something, but take a photo, make some notes, and just really keep this for the next time you have to update your CV or talk about projects you've worked on, because this is where you will sell your skills so much better. I'll give you a couple of minutes.
Excuse me, I was just wondering if you can email some of us the slides if you want.
Yeah. Happy to do that. I'll email the slides in case you don't get all the notes down. So if I do that, I'll keep going actually.
Sorry, do we email you to request?
No, I can email a presentation to the guys and they can send it out. That would make sense. Yeah. Cool. So the key learning from that is to stop commentating and start storytelling. I'll keep banging this drum throughout the presentation. As I said, I've worked in advertising. I've seen the power of storytelling. The more you tell a story, the better you will leave an impact. So in terms of another bit of sort of research, there's a really great TED Talk, and it's the Pro Wrestler's Guide to Confidence. I was a bit sceptical when I watched it at first, but what he talks about is when you step into a room or when you step into the ring, what you do is you take yourself in and you dial it up that little bit, and you dial it up. And that's what you have to think about. When you step into that room, don't just be yourself, dial it up just that little bit to show the key factors about you that are distinguishable. Classic Destiny Child, I depend on me. It had to be done, really. Ultimately, when it comes to self-promotion, it comes to career progression. You can blame not having contacts, you can blame, maybe not being at the right time, the right place, but really it's about you and what you put in and what you do and how you are in various channels, in networking meetings, all those things. It's based on you. Can I have a quick show of hands? Who has Googled themselves in the past 6 months?
Oh, God.
Wow, that's quite good actually, guys. I was impressed by that. Very true. Okay, so the importance of Googling yourself, some of you have, some of you haven't. When I Googled myself, my old MySpace, Bebo, some horrendous stuff came up, and I was like, oh, this is terrible. And I'd worked really hard on building a website, buying a domain name, all of these things, and that wasn't showing up. So one thing that I urge you to do very quickly is go home, Google yourself what is showing up, and make sure the good stuff's showing up. And to give you some context, I think really, I know everyone in this room is doing different careers, different sectors, but making sure that when someone does Google yourself, that you've got some form of a landing page that people can go to and read about is so important. Whether you're in the creative industry, the business sector, charity sector, all those different fields, make sure that when someone Googles you, there is something there that represents you right now so that people know who you are and they get a good flavour of you. I created my own personal website on Wix, completely free, very user-friendly. I have, as I say, I work in advertising. I'm not a creative, but I'm a project manager. And I have all the projects I've ever worked on. I credit everybody that's involved in it. I link Fuck Being Humble to it. There's an About Me section. So all of a sudden, if I ever need to send somebody a quick overview as to who I am, send them my website, done. And it's super simple, very easy to use, highly recommend it. I also bought my domain name because it just helps, and nobody's ever going to take stefswordwilliams.com. The second thing I do is I use Instagram, so part of the reason I started Fuck Being Humble is because I have an unhealthy addiction to Instagram, and I thought I better not scrolling of fit girls and start mentoring and helping people. So that's partly why Fuck Being Humble was started, but also my personal time. On my personal account, I also share my work that I'm sort of proud of and that I want to share. I think as long as you don't overspam and you don't overdo it, or you could actually make an alternative account if you are a visually led person and just drive people to look at your personal page. But whether it's Twitter, whether it's a blog, whether it's Instagram, try and find something that suits you that you can direct people to. And finally, LinkedIn, I know it was mentioned earlier. When I started Fuck Being Humble, I wrote a blog, and the title was Why I Launched a Self-Promotion Platform called Fuck Being Humble. 5,500 people read it around the world, and I'd been writing thought leadership articles for the past year, and nobody read them. So clearly I'd tapped into an audience in a space that was relevant to them. I actually know it was successful because I started getting hate comments from it off the back of it. But I'm super proud that Fuck Being Humble actually got a double-page spread in the Times, and I was invited to speak on BBC World News about the platform because people read this article. Thank you. And just to say, Fuck Being Humble started 4 months ago in my spare time. It's a side job. It's my side hustle. And all of that has happened in the past 4 months because I wrote one article with no paid spend behind it, nothing. So the message there really is just figure out the platforms that are most important to you. Don't do everything because you're not a superhero, and trust me, it is so hard to try and manage multiple accounts. Pick the ones that are most relevant to your industry and what you want to work on, and just really invest in it because it's one of the best ways. We are so lucky to have digital platforms like this. Super simple little tip. I like to public speak. What I like to do, if you look at my social channels, I will have a photo of myself, and then in my banner image, I've got a photo of me public speaking. So on your social media platforms, look at the things like Instagram stories, cover images, banner images. Could you be putting your work? Could you be putting a message in there? Like a really simple technique, but just think about how can you utilize all of those channels as well as possible, so that as soon as people land, inherently people will see that I'm a speaker, just like that, without me having to tell them anything about it. So, and be consistent. I think one of the worst things is when you meet someone and they are really loud on social media, and then you meet them in person and they're a completely different person, or vice versa. Just try and keep it consistent. Try and tailor your voice per platform. So you may be more professional on LinkedIn than you are on Instagram, but try and make sure that you have some consistent thread going through it, and try and make sure everything's up to date. One of the things I hate the most is when I go onto LinkedIn and you've just not even got a profession. You're a student, just put you're a student, or put you're a writer, or whatever you're trying to be, but just update it. Do not leave blank spaces, because it just looks really naff. So final task in this section is, what platforms are the best for you? For your industry, for your style of work, and for the people you're trying to reach, and are you using them? So just take a couple of minutes now to write down which platforms you think you could be using and how you could be using them better. Right, I'm going to keep moving, guys. So the key learning for this is you've got to be your own best hype man. I tell that to a lot of people as part of our manifesto. You are your best hype man. No one will sell you better than yourself. And if they do, then stay close to that person. A really good podcast to listen to is The Debrief, How to Get Better at Self-Promotion. They give really good tips, and one of the things they talk about is about really mixing up your content and not constantly spamming people with, look what I did, look what I did, look what I did, because it does get repetitive. And yeah, there's some really good tips in that, so I'd highly recommend that podcast. And finally, if at first you don't succeed, pick yourself up and try again. Aaliyah, it had to go in there. And this is networking, so I know that Lee mentioned some great tips in the last talk, so I'll try breeze through this. But networking, I'm going to give you a bit of a myth buster. Nobody is born a networker. Do not feel bad if you feel like this when you go to networking sessions, because the vast majority of the world feels like this. Now, I'm one of those people that loves talking, loves meeting new people. I actually describe myself as a bulldog in a Chinese shop instead of a bull in a China shop, because that's actually what I'm like when I first started going to networking events. I used to walk in, tell everybody exactly what I wanted them to hear, not really listen to anyone, and it was just very overwhelming, and it was really intense. And actually, just because I could talk to people, I didn't know what I was doing at all. So there is a massive skill with networking. Do not think that you are born that way, you learn that way. It's really not that easy. I think one of the things you have to do if you don't enjoy it is change the way you view it. Stop seeing it as a chore. I see it. I love meeting new people because I love hearing new stories. That is like something I love doing. So try and change the way that you view networking. Try and trigger something in your brain to not make it be something that you hate doing, and actually think, what are the best possible outcomes that could come from networking? Whether it's following a new newsletter, whether it's getting a new job, or it's making a new connection. Think of all the amazing things that could happen. And then the next networking event you'll go to, you'll be like, it's actually not that bad, is it? Trust me on this one, but I'll give you a few more tips. Figure out your agenda. So I had some really good advice from the new business development manager at Google, and she said, figure out what your small goals are. When you go to a networking event, do not expect to meet an employer and get a job. Never going to happen, really, unless you are superstar amazing. Basically, you have to figure out the ways that you need to get on their radar. So the first thing you might need to do in that networking event is just exchange business cards, or just get their name and add them on LinkedIn, or just send them an email. Do not expect to just convert someone straight away. It just won't happen in that way. So figure out what your small steps are. What are the mini wins for you guys when you're going to a networking event? What are the best possible things that could happen? Write them down and think about how you can feed them into the conversations you have. Okay, there's been a bit of a typesetting problem there, but the first thing when it comes to networking is look, Lee mentioned this earlier, when you go to networking events, you'll have worked a really long day at work, and then you're going to a networking event straight after work, and it's not what you really want to be doing. So make sure that you research loads about the event before you go, just to maximise your time whilst you're there. Think about what the key themes are in the evening. What are the topics? What's going to be talked about? What's going on? What in the world? Is there anything relevant in terms of news around this topic? Can you read up about it? Can you go there? Can you talk about these things that are happening? As Lee was saying, it's not about having just asking generic questions. It's about having a point of view when you're talking to people. Have you got a personal story to share? So again, just banging on that story thing again, but when you think of a story that you can share in relation to an event that you're going to, all of a sudden you have more of an opinion around that topic. And finally, is there a social media handle to tag, track and follow? It's a great way. I always tell people, stalk people on social media. If you type in debut talkers after this, or debut...
Real talk.
Real talk, that's the one. Sorry, guys. You'll find loads of people. You'll find loads of hashtags. It's the same on Instagram, all the different channels. Like, go straight on afterwards, look for all the people, add them, follow them. It's fine that you don't know them, because that's just one way that you can say, oh, I was at that event last night, actually. Like, sorry I didn't get to meet you, but I really enjoyed it. What did you think? All of a sudden, you've got a common ground with them. Second one is listen. So as I mentioned, you've got to listen with your ears and not with your mouth. And that's something that I've had to learn. I go into networking events and it's so hard for me to stay quiet, but I just keep asking questions and keep asking questions and keep asking questions. And eventually they'll be like, and what do you do? And because you've sat and listened to their answers, you can tailor your response in a much better way. So I could walk in and say, oh, I work in advertising for X. But if I've asked this person 10 questions, they said, oh, they're a sports fanatic and they do this, and I can, because I've listened, I can now say, well, I work with Nike, Adidas and Puma, let's have a coffee sometime. But if I bolted in and just told them I work in advertising today, I could put them off immediately. So ask, and then tell them about yourself. But make sure you tailor it around that person, because then you'll find that connection. So be open and speak to everyone. This was mentioned earlier. I used to go in and be like, your title's not big enough, I can't talk to you. Or, you're not who I want to be speaking to. I don't want to get stuck in a conversation with you. And then soon what I realised was that person introduced me to someone huge. And then that person introduced me to someone else. And this person knows a great event space. And you just can't be picky. Just talk to people. I'm going to go against a bit of feedback. My feedback is, have an empty drink so the chat is dry, you can leave and say, I'm just going to go get another drink. And I know that is slightly conflicting to what was said earlier, but try and speak to everyone and try and get I try and make it my aim to get around the room and talk to as many people as possible. So try and have that in the back of your head. Ask them where they're from and why they attended the event. Again, moving away from the generic, what do you do? But if you ask them why they attended the event, again, you can try and tailor your answer back to them in a much more strategic way. Find a common ground and you connect with. My biggest thing is if I hear a northerner, I'm like, please can we be friends in London? I'm like, sorry, are you from Newcastle? Hi, I'm Steph, nice to meet you. Finding common ground that people connect. As stupid as like being from the north, it makes such a difference. Like, try and find something. People make friends with people because they have shared interests. So whether it's football, food, where you're from, where you like to travel, what you do, try and find that and keep asking as many questions until you find that common ground and try and use that. And maybe the next time when you follow up, like, oh, it's so great to meet a fellow northerner in London, it's those sorts of things that you can hook onto. Think of ways that you can add value past your personal objectives. This is something that I learned quite quickly when I was networking. So I used to work at a startup, and in the past year I went to 3 to 4 networking events every week. So I would say I'm a bit of a serial networker. And in doing that meant that I learned it wasn't about always, okay, I need to get a job out of you. It was, why don't I suggest a great podcast for you? Or why don't I introduce you to someone I know, so the next time you go to think of me, you will think of me as someone that's helped you past my personal goal. So when you talk and when you ask all these questions, listen out for things that you might be able to help and add value past your own personal objective, and then you'll build that stronger relationship. And finally, link up. So this is sometimes often forgotten, but it's one of the most important things. Try and connect with that person 24 hours after you've met them. It's not always easy, you've got busy lives, but if you can go onto LinkedIn, find them, add them the next day and say, great to meet you last night, it'll be fresh in their memory. It's just really important to try and connect with them quite quickly. When you do, introduce yourself and connect with them within the first line. So tell them why. So when I applied for my job when I moved to London, the company I was applying for was called Matter Media because they wanted to make things that mattered. And for me, I'd been working in traditional advertising agencies that were big corporates and they wanted to work for purely money. So when I wrote to them, I said, I've been working in the industry for years now and I'm really want to work for a company that's going to make a difference, and I believe that we have the same values. They didn't even read my CV, they rung me up because they just loved my cover letter, because it was that strong, because within that, I managed to hit on the values and the points that they believe in. So when you're applying for a job and you're reaching out to someone, stalk them, research them, what do they like, what drinks do they like, all those things. We are so lucky, as I said earlier, to have the technology we have. Go onto their personal profiles, read everything about them, find out about them, try and find that common ground very quickly in the opening few lines of your message. Qualify yourself. So we are busy people at work, and we want to be talking to people that have kind of earned the right to, or have got something that can add value. So tell me why you should be speaking to me and what you can do to help my life, basically. Leave them with something memorable. If you've got a giant uncle, definitely throw that in. Or if you've got any other facts that I can go, oh, that girl who did a TED talk, she messaged me the other day, she was really great, I need to get back in contact with her. Try and leave them with that key fact that is memorable. And finally, always try and propose an action. It's very easy to say, look forward to hearing from you, and it's such a passive statement. Say, I'm going to follow up next week with another message, or I'm going to give you a quick call next week to make sure you receive my message. If not, let me know, sort of thing. That will force them. You'll soon realise whether they want to speak to you or they don't. They'll say, oh, I'm sorry, it's not for me, or you will follow up and you'll find out, sort of thing. But try and make sure that you propose an action and don't just leave it as a passive ending thing. But ultimately, try and find the you and them in the group. So just make sure that you really get across why you are relevant to them, what you could do to help their business, what it is that makes you different to everyone else to really impact their everyday life. So now, I think you sort of had it, so I think maybe we'll breeze over this one because you've already got 40 people you're meant to be reaching out to. But in that 40, star 3 people that you'd really like to reach out to. And the key learning for that is to connect personally and memorably. As I say, try and really connect with people on a personal level, and hopefully they'll remember you in a better way. There's a great TED talk, What I Learned from 100 Days of Rejection. This guy goes round and just walks into places asking for the most ridiculous things. He went into Krispy Kreme donuts and said, can I have 5 donuts all linked together like the Olympic rings? And the woman was like, I don't know, give me a minute. She went back 20 minutes later, she made it. She went to a burger joint and said, can I just have this burger for free? And the manager was like, no. And he was like, okay, just thought I'd ask. And he basically does it for 100 days and asks the most ridiculous things. But it kind of just gets you over that fear. Like, what he actually starts doing is saying, why? Why won't you do that? Why won't you do that? And actually, when he pushes them, it's because they're, like, maybe worried themselves, but not because they've got an actual answer. So I know a mentor also in the industry, and she encourages people to go tell a fit guy or a fit girl, oh, you're really fit, in a bar, like I might tell you all to do now, and just see what happens. What's the rejection? Is it really that bad after you've done it? Because if it's not, when it comes to networking things, that rejection you'll quickly get over. So maybe think of some rejection, things that you can do that you'll get over quite quickly. So here's my final playlist. If you don't have a dream, how are you going to have a dream come true, Dizzy Rascal? Let Me Blow Your Mind, Eve Gwen Stefani. It's the journey that teaches you about your destination, Drake. I Depend on Me, Destiny's Child, and if at first you don't succeed, dust yourself off and try again. My platform is mainly around Instagram. We are Fuck Being Humble LDN. We post regular tips all the time, so feel free to give us a follow and let us know if you want any further guidance on things. And finally, as I open the talk, try and remember that self-promotion shouldn't be a dirty word. And if anyone tries to tell you it is, they're usually just a bit insecure about themselves. Try not to let being humble get in the way of your future success. That's everything from me. Thank you.